Hi guys, welcome back to MisoDog TV channel. Today we would like to talk about how to pass the JLPT N1 test because she passed it 2 years ago. So firstly, we would like to show you how much Sophie can talk in Japanese. So can you just introduce yourself in Japanese? Yeah.
はい、ソフィーです。日本語を勉強し始めてから12年が経つんですけど、4年前くらいに日本に来て3年間日本にある大学に通って言語学校ではなく、普通のアメリカの大学なんですけど、日本語専攻で卒業しました。今は主に日本語を使う会社で働いています。本当にゼロから始めたんですけど、アニメとか、日本のドラマ、映画を全部字幕なしで無事見れますはい。
そしたらなんかソフィーN1 テストを2年前に受けたっていう、
そう
でまあ受かったっていうのを聞いたんですけど、それって簡単だったのか N1 テストって。
そうですね、簡単でした。まあその模擬試験みたいなのあるじゃないですか。1回だけ自分でやって次の日テストを受けに行って受かりました。
もう少しの期間の勉強でも受かったって。
受かりました。はい。
すごい。
ありがとうございます。
See you guys. You know how much she can talk in Japanese. Actually, I've known her for like a year, and I couldn't tell if she's a Japanese or American. If she only talks Japanese, yeah, she's very close to like Japanese native speaker right now.
Let me show you this graph of my Japanese abilities.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So there's this part where I'm just kind of like I'm just kind of there.
Yeah, I think you guys are gonna curious about this part.
What is this, right?
Yeah, just goes out.
Yeah. So like around up until this point, I didn't actually feel confident in my Japanese abilities at all. I was like, dang, I suck. So like from here to here around, I attended a Japanese language school in the US. It was just Saturday classes from like, I don't know, the morning to the afternoon. So it was like 2.5 hours, really short, basic. We learned hiragana, katakana, basic grammar. And then, I mean, I think that you don't exactly need a language school to improve your Japanese. But it helped me because, I mean, basic grammar is kind of hard to study on your own. You can always look the same stuff up on the internet as well if you really wanted to. But from here to here, I've continued to watch anime. Anime is obviously like a big part of my growth as a Japanese speaker. And I don't know, people say for the memes, like people say ironically like, oh, I learned Japanese from anime, but I think it's actually true. Like it's really helpful. It's really helpful. But at the same time, you can't just have anime. Like anime shouldn't be your only source of learning Japanese. For me, like having the language school was helpful. So having basic grammar study along with anime to like confirm or practice what you're learning is helpful to growth pretty much.
Yeah. So Sophie, what happened during the sudden growth, of this graph? It's just you were like kind of learning here and just went all the way up here. Yeah, kind of curious about it.
Yeah. So let's see. Around this age, after middle school, I believe, in my first or second year of high school, I quit the language school just because I thought I couldn't grow anymore, pretty much. So I quit the language school and started studying on my own. At this point, I only had the knowledge of like very basic grammar, very basic kanji, and I could write hiragana, katakana. So like, I don't know, something like dakara or like, like that sort of grammar is what is the only things I knew. But from here, I started seeking out more opportunities to learn Japanese on my own, and that was important to this.
Okay.
So, for example, like in the classroom, you only have your teacher who's there to help you, and you have your classmates who are all around the same level as you, and you could say that those are the same as like safety nets. It's like they're there to help if you make a mistake, and it's like they'll help you and they'll kind of hold your hand as you go along. But for me, the important thing was to take out the safety nets, just like rip them out, I guess. So because the more I talked, the more I improved, pretty much. So seeking out opportunities on your own is very, very important. Yeah.
How did you increase your opportunities to use Japanese?
Okay, so one thing that I actually did on my own without anyone else is when I would read manga in English, I would translate the words in English to Japanese like as best as I could. I tried to like fish out all the vocabulary and grammar points that I could possibly use and like change it just like in my head while I was reading, like, oh, how would this character say this if it was in Japanese, you know? But the biggest way that I was able to improve was looking for people to help me improve. Making friends with Japanese exchange students was really helpful. I personally think it's a lot better than, I don't know, language exchange applications and stuff, because you're face to face and you can like do things together and you can actually like become friends, you know? The other way, probably one of the most important for myself, was to use Japanese on Japanese only sites. So websites, applications that only Japanese people use. So Japanese people who don't speak any English, that's the best way for you to improve, because you have no safety nets. They won't know an adequate amount of English to speak to you back. So you have no other choice but to speak in Japanese. And in the end, like, that's just really helpful. But of course, depending on the site, it can be a little sketchy, a little dangerous, as is the internet. So just, I guess, keep that in mind when you're looking for language exchange partners. Anyway, like, just like observe the kind of words that people use on these kind of sites, whether it's text-based or voice-based. Like, listen to the words that they use, try to imitate those in your next conversation with someone else. There's usually a lot of like set phrases that you can use depending on the application, the website. Try to use those, figure out what they mean, how they use them, like the situations in which people use them.
So Sophie,
Yeah.
after you started, finding opportunities to, use Japanese, was it like a smooth sailing, or like did you face some kind of like challenges?
Yeah, there were a lot of challenges. Definitely, finding people, native speakers to speak with was really fun. It was really fun, and it was a really good way to practice Japanese. But I had I faced a lot of like walls during that as well. There was a point where I thought, like, I'm making the same sentence pretty much. Like, my sentence structure was exactly the same. And like, I would listen to people speak and hear all the variety of these words and these grammar points that they would all use, native speakers, obviously. And I would think, like, why don't those words like come out of my mouth too? And it was pretty frustrating for a while, but eventually I got over it. And then even after being able to talk to a native speaker one-on-one, it's a lot different when you're placed in a situation where there are multiple native speakers and you have to keep up with this conversation that's going like 100 miles a minute, and you don't know what's happening, you don't know where to go in or where to go out. Like, it's really difficult. I still can't say that I'm like really good at it, but that is another wall that is definitely there. Okay.
So I know that most people who study Japanese have trouble with kanji. Like, how did you do it?
The best way that I had was to read manga. Read manga in Japanese. And the way that I did this, especially if you don't have access to a Japanese bookstore in your area, apps like, I don't know, Komiko and stuff, like apps that they distribute in Japan to Japanese people to read online manga. I use those, and the important thing is to get yourself away from the furigana because, again, it's a safety net. You're not going to really remember how to read the kanji with the furigana there to help you constantly. So the way I did it was to just read manga on the apps that didn't have furigana and constantly look up all the kanji that I didn't know how to read or what they meant, that sort of stuff. It's a lot of work, especially if you don't know how to read it, like, it's how do you look it up, right? But Google Translate on your phone and the Google keyboard these days has a function where you can write kanji, so you just have to try your best, try your best to write kanji. Yeah, it's probably not the most efficient way either, but it was the way that I found was the most painless. And it might seem difficult at first because it's like, you're looking up the same kanji over and over and over again because you just can't remember it. But eventually it sticks. Like, it's not efficient, but eventually it will stick, and it's very painless. But if you're studying for N1, if you're going like for the more advanced, I just want to get N1 route, it's just helpful to pay attention in your advanced Japanese classes and learn the kanji that they teach you, because it will show up. Finally, I guess it's just like having the willpower, the want to learn kanji. I remember speaking to many Japanese people, and they asked, like, what's difficult about learning Japanese? And I always said kanji, and they were like, you don't need kanji. Like, Japanese people can't read kanji either. It's okay. Like, your phone will do it for you, or like, it's fine. No one knows kanji these days. And I trusted them for a really long time. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. We don't need kanji. But for me, I met another Japanese language learner who is now like my best friend, and they were really good at kanji. And I thought to myself, wow, if I could like read that much kanji, like that'd be really cool too. And so that really motivated me to learn as well. So you kind of have to learn to love kanji pretty much. You need to learn to like have motivation to learn it. And then it's pretty easy from there. As long as you don't think kanji is a pain, change the mindset. It helps. And then, yeah, it also helps a lot when you actually come to Japan. I mean, obviously signs are in English, but if you can read kanji, it helps a lot getting around and stuff. So
Sophie.
Yes.
So you passed N1 test, the N1 test, right?
Yes.
So you passed it like a few years ago.
Yeah.
When you were 20 years old, I think
like,
your skill was like around here. So
it's like here.
Yeah. But how difficult the N1 test? Like, I don't even know how difficult it is. So.
Yeah. The N1. So I passed it almost 3 years ago. I would say I could have passed it like, I don't know, like around here.
Okay.
But it would have required me to study a little more. So the thing about my passing N1 is that I really did not do proper studying for it. I bought a vocabulary book. Didn't use it. I sold it afterward. I bought a practice test, a thing with 3 practice tests, and I used 1.5 of them. I did half of one the night before the test when I stayed up till like 2 or 3 in the morning. I was like, maybe I should do a practice test, and I did half of it. I didn't do the listening section, and I just went to sleep. It was easy for me to pass the N1, but if you really want to just like study, then it's just really important to have those practice tests and pay attention in your advanced Japanese classes. Because they will actually teach you a lot, especially when it comes to reading comprehension. The N1 is all about kanji, all about reading comprehension, so as long as you have those points down, you could even throw the listening section if you do really well on the other 2.
So, what's your study look like right now, after, pass the N1 test?
Yeah, so the N1 itself, like any other standardized test, is like, it has its patterns and stuff, so it doesn't really accurately measure your ability to use Japanese in daily life, honestly, I believe. So for me, right now, my studying looks like reading, lots and lots of reading. I buy a lot of Japanese books and just never finish them because I'm still really slow at reading. So that's something that I'd like to improve on. I can't write kanji at all. The JLPT does not require you to speak or write. So even if you're able to speak at a native level, it doesn't mean you're going to pass the N1. If you can write a lot of kanji, doesn't mean you're going to pass the N1. So I definitely can't write kanji at all. So that's something that I would also like to improve on. And then eventually, because I am in Japan and am working in Japan and want to continue working in Japan, I want to take the BJT, which is the Business Japanese test, because that is definitely, it's a sign to employers that you can use business level Japanese. N1 has always been the business level sort of test, but there are, in reality, a lot of people who can't speak Japanese even though they have taken the N1. So the BJT is very helpful for you to have if you're looking to work.
So Sophie, what are some overall tips that you would give to people who are studying Japanese right now?
I think it depends on what you're aiming for. Like if N1 is your end goal, then my advice would to just be buy a bunch of textbooks, pay attention in your Japanese classes, like study. Because what N1 really looks at is whether you can read and comprehend, and whether you can read kanji, and as long as you know your grammar and your vocabulary, you'll be okay. So, but if you want to go the more natural way, like I did, then there are a few things that I guess you should keep in mind. And one is that Google Translate isn't always like your enemy. Like, I wouldn't say use it on the daily to like translate long sentences and stuff, but it's a good tool to help you check your own sentences and make sure that they're kind of cohesive, especially when you're like at the lower levels of Japanese. And then imitation is key. If you just listen to how Japanese people speak and imitate it, try to use the same words in the same context, then eventually it'll just come more naturally. I watched a lot of Japanese group YouTubers who all talk in a big group together, and that really helped me get a grasp on how Japanese people talk amongst each other, and you just have to imitate that. You might not think anime is a very good tool for speaking because there are a lot of words that they don't use in real life, that sort of stuff, but it's always good to practice your intonation, so I don't think it's a bad thing to try to imitate anime sometimes, as long as you know what's actually useful and what is actually not. And then another thing is to just surround yourself with Japanese, watch more Japanese YouTube, listen to more Japanese music, and I don't know, look things up on Google that you could look up in your own native language, look it up in Japanese and try to read the articles on it. Just surround yourself and immerse yourself in as much Japanese as possible within your daily life as well. And then finally, just do it.
That is simple.
It's simple, but it's very important. My father tried to get me to go to conversational Japanese lessons for the longest time, and I just kept saying no because I was like, no, everyone is going to be better than me. I don't know how to speak Japanese. I can't speak. I'm so bad at Japanese. So I didn't want to try to speak because I wanted to be more confident before trying to actually speak. But that time, if you keep waiting for it, it won't come. So you just kind of have to do it. And it's the only direction you can go is up unless you stop using Japanese completely. So it's important just to try and make mistakes and not be afraid of making mistakes, and that's just how you get better.
Okay, so that was the end of this video. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe. So okay, see you next time.
Bye.